The NFL draft is coming up here in a couple of weeks, but there'll be one star quarterback from the 2024 college football season who will not be allowed to be in this year's draft pool. He ended up finishing top 10 in the Heisman, led his team to a nearly perfect season, and shows the grit to potentially be a Taysom Hill-like prospect. Unfortunately, because of certain rules, which we'll find out later in the video, he is not eligible to be in this year's draft class and is essentially banned from the NFL draft. Today, I want to introduce you to a quarterback by the name of Bryson Daly. How did a guy who was a two-star athlete who no one thought anything of become one of the best players in college football last year? How did he become an NFL draft prospect? And why on earth is he not allowed to play on Sundays? But before we get started, if you're a big fan of college football, be sure to subscribe to the channel, leave a like if you want to support today's video, and let me know what player, team, topic, or situation I can cover next. Now let's get started and talk about Bryson Daly. But in order to understand how Daly got to this point, we first need to go back in time. The story starts in the small town of Abernathy, Texas, which is a no-stoplight town 20 miles north of Lubbock and was built to serve the Santa Fe Railroad more than a century ago. The Dalys have lived for football for generations, as both of his grandfathers were coaches and his mom even coached basketball and track, and there was plenty of sports knowledge passed down. But more than that was a conviction about how the game should be played. His dad said, quote, "We were very old school. The team was going to be it, not the individual. If we were wearing white socks, we were all wearing white socks." Bryson Daly had always seen himself as a football player, and his mission in life had never been more clear. His dad, Daly, was the head coach at Abernathy, and he felt that Bryson had Division I talent following his freshman year. He ran for 1,700 yards and 18 touchdowns, and also threw for over 1,000 yards and 7 scores, but did have 17 picks, which was kind of terrible. He said, quote, "You don't lead a team like that, especially in our division, to the semifinal. The load was always on his shoulders, and he had great teammates throughout the years, but I knew he could play Division I football after that year." His family now hung around a barbecue truck with a couple of other retired coaches. During the week, his dad could be found trimming and carving slabs of brisket at Kelly's Hill Country Barbecue. Apparently, he was one of the top in the state of Texas. They had 2 1,000-pound smokers and a black trailer. They cooked a variety of meats, and it doesn't get more Texas than they are. Bryson was a 4-sport kid who started quarterback for 4 years, leading the Abernathy Antelopes to a 2A state semifinal appearance as a freshman, and he actually kicked the game-winning field goal in the round of 16, which is nuts. But flashing forward a couple of years, his quarterback credentials got him nowhere with recruiters. He was targeted by Ivy League schools and smaller Texas programs as a linebacker, and while he had the mentality to play linebacker, he wanted a chance to play quarterback. Army would eventually offer it to him in their throwback offense, plus all the other mutually attractive elements that a program like Army has. They're considered the, quote, last of the hard programs. If you want to play football like that, you gotta go to the military academies. Current head coach at North Texas, Eric Morris, was a rising star in the ranks, and actually was one of the few coaches to recruit Daly, but ultimately, he was not able to get him to land there when he was at Incarnate Word. Instead, Daly, as I said, would end up signing with Army, after being recruited as that linebacker. He'd end up going to West Point with the promise of a lifetime. He said, quote, "Getting the offer here as a quarterback was a dream come true. They believed in me at that position, and that meant the world to me." As signing day fastly approached, Daly could do nothing but smile as he signed his national letter of intent to play for the Army Black Knights. He was just as successful on the defensive end of the ball as well, as he had 64 tackles and an interception during his senior year, and in total he had 8 D1 offers, including Army, Abilene Christian, Harvard, Incarnate Word, and Princeton. Going back in time a little bit, Harvard was the first school to technically offer him, but after enjoying a couple of visits, he said he felt different when he decided to go to West Point. He said, quote, "I never thought about serving until I went up to Army and saw what they were all about. I saw what it was, and that's really when it became real for me." He was pumped to get to Army, but in total to finish his glorious career, Bryson went 43-7 as a starter, threw for 4,800 yards and 57 touchdowns, and ran for 6,300 yards and 97 touchdowns. Crazy stats did not translate to stars though, as according to 24/7 Sports, Bryson Daly was a 2-star recruit and the 242nd best athlete in the class of 2020. But how did he end up doing at Army? Well, let's go ahead and take a look. As we all know, Bryson ran the ball a lot in their spread option offense in high school, but it was not the same as the Army triple option. The transition to Coach Monken's system was actually very difficult at first. Bryson said, quote, "Spring my freshman year was some of the worst football I ever played. By the time his sophomore year had rolled around, he grasped it well enough to make the travel squad and ended up becoming the 4th-string quarterback for the Knights. But as time went on, he started to pick up the offense, and when the Black Knights switched back to a ground and pound and a dive and pitch style of football, Bryson Daly was all of a sudden back in business. Daly would end up having a good 2023 season for the Army Black Knights, as while he became the starter, he ended up passing for 913 yards with 7 touchdowns, and also ran for 900 yards and 7 score. His best game came against UTSA, as he threw for 133 yards in a score, and also ran for over 100 on the ground with a score. He also had 170 yards in a win over number 25 Air Force, and Daly was the guy going into 2024, but nationally, nobody knew or cared about this dude. But this season, he became quote-unquote Captain America and led Army to one of their best starts in school history. He had 2 touchdowns in their Week 1 victory over Lehigh, before he would then lead them to wins against Florida Atlantic, Rice, and Temple. He had 3 touchdowns against both the Rice and Temple Owls, and all of a sudden the team was 4-0 in the month of September. Against Tulsa, he didn't have an incomplete pass with 2 touchdowns, and also ran for 2 more scores on the ground. Daly was starting to heat up. He had 5 total touchdowns, including 4 on the ground in a dominating victory over UAB, had 6 touchdowns against East Carolina, and all of a sudden, Daly was now becoming a Heisman candidate. Army was 7-0, but unfortunately, there would be an injury, and he would have to not play against Air Force. He was overjoyed by watching his backup Dwayne Coleman get to a 20-3 victory over them, but his next game would be a homecoming matchup against North Texas. While some wondered if he would play, Daly wasn't going to miss it for the world. While he did throw his first interception of the season, he'd end up having 153 yards and 2 touchdowns, and they would beat North Texas 14-3. All of a sudden, the Army Black Knights were 9-0, and this was incredible. They were at the top of the American Athletic Conference, had a good chance of going to the college football playoff, and was now a top 10 Heisman candidate. This was the Black Knights' highest AP ranking since 1962, and now he was considered Captain America. But he would get humbled. Against number 6 Notre Dame in a battle of unbeatens, Army would just get killed. They lost 49-14 against the Fighting Irish, who were just better than them in every category, but Daly didn't go out without a fight, having 2 touchdowns in it. But if they could bounce back and win out the rest of the season, they could potentially make the playoff. Highly unlikely, but he would still give it a shot. He'd have 3 touchdowns in a win over UTSA, before leading them to the American Athletic Conference Championship against Tulane. They'd actually ended up winning against the Green Wave 35-14, as Daly had 4 touchdowns on the ground. As Daly now approached the end of his college football career, he had one goal. That was to beat Navy. Everyone knows this is the biggest rivalry in all of sports, and Navy was also having a tremendous season. Blake Horvath was Navy's star, and the two went head-to-head. Unfortunately, the midshipman would get the best of Daly, as he'd have a career-high 3 interceptions in this game, and ended up having 1 score, and a 31-13 blowout loss. This was super unfortunate, and he now had one final game against Louisiana Tech. Daly ended up having 3 touchdowns, and would now leave college football forever. In total this past season, Daly threw for 1,000 yards with 9 touchdowns, but ended up running for 1,700 yards and 32 touchdowns. Army had one of their best seasons in recent memory, and while he was not super eye-catching, he was the first quarterback since Kelvin Hopkins to have over 1,000 yards rushing and passing. He ended up also finishing in the top 10 in the Heisman, but was not invited out for the show, which was definitely sad. Turning towards his NFL career, many have compared him to Taysom Hill. He's a guy who found success in the league as a versatile player who could play quarterback, tight end, and even special teams. A lot of people have a cult-like following for Taysom Hill, as he could literally do everything: throw, run, block, and even when called upon, catch passes. For teams who are looking to add a Swiss Army knife, many would consider Bryson Daly to be that guy. At 6 foot, 220 pounds, he was a little bit smaller than Hill, but had comparable toughness, if not more toughness. The NFL has increasingly emphasized versatility, and this would have made Daly a very attractive prospect for teams who are trying to think outside the box. Would he have been a first-round pick? Heck no, but could he have been drafted in the later rounds or gotten plenty of priority free agent deals? Sure. It probably was never going to happen at the quarterback spot either, as he would have to truly refine his passing mechanics, increase his speed, and have to learn an entire new offense. No offense, but Army's triple option offense is not exactly suitable to the NFL and would make it nearly impossible for him to transition. Running back or being a Swiss Army knife player was Daly's best bet. Due to the military services obligations, this causes a conflict with the NFL draft, and he will not be able to get drafted this fall. He doesn't know where he'll necessarily be. He doesn't know where he'll be located in the Army, but he knows he won't be playing in the NFL. He could be in Alabama, South Korea, Michigan, Germany, or even the Middle East. He'll now become a second lieutenant in the Army and will serve his brothers and his country instead of playing in the NFL. Honestly, it is a little bit unfortunate that Daly won't be able to play in the league. For players who decide to go to Army, Navy, or Air Force, they now know the consequences. They could become a superstar, but it won't really mean much. We saw Keenan Reynolds, the star quarterback for Navy, get out of it a couple of years ago, and then most recently there was another decision. Before 2019, you were able to go to the NFL, but after that, in 2019, they ruled that all players have to do their 2-year commitment. Navy's athletic director said, quote, 2 years being away from the game is a tremendous setback. There was one exception to the rule that created a ton of uproar, as a couple of years ago, Army linebacker Andre Carter II was a projected first-round pick, and to him, it felt like the rug had been pulled out from under him, because when he arrived to Army, this rule wasn't a thing. So yeah, they gave an indult to all players who were pre-2019, but now, there's no getting out of it no matter how good you are. Doesn't matter if you're a top 10 Heisman candidate, you're going to serve the military, and there's no getting out of it. That is unfortunately why Bryson Daly is banned from the NFL technically, but it doesn't take away from his incredible career. Not often do you see a 2-star recruit from a tiny town become a Heisman candidate, but that's what Bryson Daly did. What do you guys think though? If you're an Army fan, where does Bryson Daly rank on the all-time Army quarterbacks list? And who's another crazy player I could take a look at next? Be sure to let me know down below, leave a like if you want to support today's video, subscribe if you're new, and check out one of the videos on the end screen. Hope to see you guys again soon, but until next time, peace.